County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. Part 3, A Taste for Country. Chapter 5, Wildlife and American Culture. The culture of primitive peoples is often based on wildlife. Thus, the Plains Indian not only ate buffalo, but buffalo largely determined his architecture, dress, language, arts, and religion. In civilized peoples, the cultural base shifts elsewhere, but the culture nevertheless retains part of its wild roots. I here discuss the value of this wild rootage. No one can weigh or measure culture, hence, I shall waste no time trying to do so. Suffice it to say that by common consent of thinking people, there are cultural values in the sports, customs, and experiences that renew contacts with wild things. I ventured the opinion that these values are of three kinds. First, there is value in any experience that reminds us of our distinctive national origins and evolution, i.e., that stimulates awareness of history. Such awareness is nationalism in its best sense. For lack of any other short name, I shall call this, in our case, the split rail value. For example, a Boy Scout has tanned a coonskin cap and goes Daniel Boone in the willow thicket below the tracks. He is reenacting American history. He is, to that extent, culturally prepared to face the dark and bloody realities of the present. Again, a farmer boy arrives in the schoolroom seeking of muskrat. He has tended his traps before breakfast. He is reenacting the romance of the fur trade. Ontogeny repeats phylogeny in society as well as in the individual. Second, there is value in any experience that reminds us of our dependency on the soil, plant, animal, man food chain, and of the fundamental organization of the biota. Civilization has so cluttered this elemental man-earth relation with gadgets and middlemen that awareness of it is growing dim. We fancy that industry supports us, forgetting what supports industry. Time was when education moved toward soil, not away from it. The nursery jingle about bringing home a rabbit skin to wrap the baby bunting in is one of many reminders in folklore that man once hunted to feed and clothe his family. Third, there is value in any experience that exercises those ethical restraints collectively called sportsmanship. Our tools for the pursuit of wildlife improve faster than we do, and sportsmanship is a voluntary limitation in the use of these armaments. It is aimed to augment the role of skill and shrink the role of gadgets in the pursuit of wild things. A peculiar virtue in wildlife ethics is that the hunter ordinarily has no gallery to applaud or disapprove of his conduct. Whatever his acts, they are dictated by his own conscience rather than by a mob of onlookers. It is difficult to exaggerate the importance of this fact. Voluntary adherence to an ethical code elevates the self-respect of the sportsman, but it should not be forgotten that voluntary disregard of the code degenerates and depraves him. For example, a common denominator of all sporting codes is not to waste good meat. Yet, it is now a demonstrable fact that Wisconsin deer hunters, in their pursuit of a legal buck, kill and abandon in the woods at least one doe, fawn, or spike buck for every 2 legal bucks taken out. In other words, approximately half the hunters shoot any deer until a legal deer is killed. The illegal carcasses are left where they fall. Such deer hunting is not only without social value, but constitutes actual training for ethical depravity elsewhere. It seems then that split rail and man earth experiences have zero or plus values, but that ethical experiences may have minus values as well. This then defines roughly three kinds of cultural nutriment available to our outdoor roots. It does not follow that culture is fed. The extraction of value is never automatic. Only a healthy culture can feed and grow. Is culture fed by our present forms of outdoor recreation? The pioneer period gave birth to two ideas that are the essence of split rail value in outdoor sports. One is the go light idea, the other, the one bullet, one buck idea. The pioneer went light of necessity. He shot with economy and precision because he lacked the transport, the cash, and the weapons requisite for machine gun tactics. Let it be clear then that in their inception, both of these ideas were forced on us. We made a virtue of necessity. In their later evolution, however, they became a code of sportsmanship, a self-imposed limitation on sport. On them is based a distinctively American tradition of self-reliance, hardihood, woodcraft, and marksmanship. These are intangibles, but they are not abstractions. Theodore Roosevelt was a great sportsman, not because he hung up many trophies, but because he expressed this intangible American tradition in words any schoolboy could understand. A more subtle and accurate expression is found in the early writings of Stuart Edward White. It is not far amiss to say that such men created cultural value by being aware of it and by creating a pattern for its growth. Then came the gadgeteer, otherwise known as the sporting goods dealer. He has draped the American outdoorsman with an infinity of contraptions, all offered as aids to self-reliance, hardihood, woodcraft, or marksmanship, but too often functioning as substitutes for them. Gadgets fill the pockets. They dangle from neck and belt. The overflow fills the auto truck and also the trailer. Each item of outdoor equipment grows lighter and often better, but the aggregate poundage becomes tonnage. The traffic in gadgets adds up to astronomical sums, which are soberly published as representing the economic value of wildlife. But what of cultural values? As an end case, consider the duck hunter sitting in a steel boat behind composition decoys. A putt-putt motor has brought him to the blind without exercise. Canned heat stands by to warm him in case of a chilling wind. It talks to the passing flocks on a factory collar in what he hopes are seductive tones. Home lessons from a phonograph record have taught him how. The decoys work despite the collar. A flock circles in. It must be shot at before it circles twice, for the marsh bristles with other sportsmen, similarly accoutred, who might shoot first. He opens up at 70 yards, for his polychoke is set for infinity, and the advertisements have told him that Super Z shells, and plenty of them, have a long reach. The flock flares. A couple of cripples scale off to die elsewhere. Is this sportsman absorbing cultural value, or is he just feeding minks? The next blind opens up at 75 yards. How else is a fellow to get some shooting? This is duck shooting, current model. It is typical of all public grounds and of many clubs. Where is the goal light idea, the one bullet tradition? The answer is not a simple one. Roosevelt did not disdain the modern rifle. White used freely the aluminum pot, the silk tent, dehydrated foods. Somehow, they used mechanical aids in moderation without being used by them. I do not pretend to know what is moderation, or where the line is between legitimate and illegitimate gadgets. It seems clear, though, that the origin of gadgets has much to do with their cultural effects. Homemade aids to sport or outdoor life often enhance rather than destroy the man earth drama. He who kills a trout with his own fly has scored two coups, not one. I use many factory made gadgets myself, yet there must be some limit beyond which money bought aids to sport destroy the cultural value of sport. Not all sports have degenerated to the same extent as duck hunting. Defenders of the American tradition still exists. Perhaps the bow and arrow movement and the revival of falconry mark the beginnings of a reaction. The net trend, however, is clearly toward more and more mechanization, with a corresponding shrinkage in cultural values, especially split rail values and ethical restraints. I have the impression that the American sportsman is puzzled. He doesn't understand what is happening to him. Bigger and better gadgets are good for industry, so why not for outdoor recreation? It has not dawned on him that outdoor recreations are essentially primitive, atavistic, that their value is a contrast value, that excessive mechanization destroys contrast by moving the factory to the woods or to the marsh. The sportsman has no leaders to tell him what is wrong. The sporting press no longer represents sport. It has turned billboard for the gadgeteer. Wildlife administrators are too busy producing something to shoot at to worry much about the cultural value of the shooting. Because everybody from Xenophon to Teddy Roosevelt said sport has value, it is assumed that this value must be indestructible. Among non-gunpowder sports, the impact of mechanization has had diverse effects. The modern field glass, camera, and the aluminum bird band have certainly not deteriorated the cultural value of ornithology. Fishing, but for outboard motors and aluminum canoes, seems less severely mechanized than hunting. On the other hand, motorized transport has nearly destroyed the sport of wilderness travel by leaving only fly specks of wilderness to travel in. Fox hunting with hounds, backwoods style, presents a dramatic instance of partial and perhaps harmless mechanized invasion. This is one of the purest of sports. It has real split rail flavor. It has man earth drama of the first water. The fox is deliberately left unshot, hence, ethical restraint is also present. But we now follow the chase in forwards. The voice of bugle end mingles with the honk of the flivver. However, no one is likely to invent a mechanical foxhound or to screw a polychoke on the hound's nose. No one is likely to teach dog training by phonograph or by other painless shortcuts. I think the gadgeteer has reached the end of his tether in dogdom. It is not quite accurate to ascribe all the ills of sport to the inventor of physical aids to sport. The advertiser invents ideas, and ideas are seldom as honest as physical objects, even though they may be equally useless. One such deserves special attention: the where to go department. Knowledge of the whereabouts of good hunting or fishing is a very personal form of property. It is like rod, dog, or gun, a thing to be loaned or given as a personal courtesy. But to hawk it in the marketplace of the sports column as an aid to circulation seems to me another matter. To hand it to all and sundry as free public service seems to me distinctly another matter. Even conservation departments now tell Tom, Dick, and Harry where the fish are biting and where a flock of ducks has ventured to alight for a meal. All of these organized promiscuities tend to depersonalize one of the essentially personal elements in outdoor sports. I do not know where the line lies between legitimate and illegitimate practice. I am convinced, though, that where to go service has broken all bounds of reason. If the hunting or fishing is good, the where to go service suffices to attract the desired excess of sportsmen. But if it is no good, the advertiser must resort to more forcible means. One such is the fishing lottery, in which a few hatchery fish are tagged and a prize is offered for the fisherman catching the winning number. This curious hybrid between the techniques of science and of the pool hall ensures the overfishing of many an already exhausted lake and brings a glow of civic pride to many a village chamber of commerce. It is idle for the professional wildlife managers to consider themselves aloof from these affairs. The production engineer and the salesman belong to the same company. Both are tarred with the same stick. Wildlife managers are trying to raise game in the wild by manipulating its environment, and thus to convert hunting from exploitation to cropping. If the conversion takes place, how will it affect cultural values? It must be admitted that split rail flavor and free for all exploitation are historically associated. Daniel Boone had scant patience with agricultural cropping, let alone wildlife cropping. Perhaps the stubborn reluctance of the one gullus sportsman to be converted to the cropping idea is an expression of his split rail inheritance. Probably cropping is resisted because it is incompatible with one component of the split rail tradition, namely free hunting. Mechanization offers no cultural substitute for the split rail values it destroys, at least none visible to me. Cropping or management does offer a substitute, which to me has at least equal value, namely wild husbandry. The experience of managing land for wildlife crops has the same value as any other form of farming. It is a reminder of the man earth relation. Moreover, ethical restraints are involved, thus, managing game without resorting to predator control calls for ethical restraint of a higher order. It may be concluded, then, that game cropping shrinks one value, split rail, but enhances both of the others. If we regard outdoor sports as a field of conflict between an immensely vigorous process of mechanization and a wholly static tradition, then the outlook for cultural values is indeed dark. But why cannot our concept of sport grow with the same vigor as our list of gadgets? Perhaps the salvation of cultural value lies in seizing the offensive. I, for one, believe that the time is ripe. Sportsmen can determine for themselves the shape of things to come. The last decade, for example, has disclosed a totally new form of sport which does not destroy wildlife, which uses gadgets without being used by them, which outflanks the problem of posted land, and which greatly increases the human carrying capacity of a unit area. This sport knows no bad limit, no closed season. It needs teachers, but not wardens. It calls for a new woodcraft of the highest cultural value. The sport I refer to is wildlife research. Wildlife research started as a professional priestcraft. The more difficult and laborious research problems must doubtless remain in professional hands, but there are plenty of problems suitable for all grades of amateurs. In the field of mechanical inventions, research has long since spread to amateurs. In the biological field, the sport value of amateur research is just beginning to be realized. Thus, Margaret Morse Nice, an amateur ornithologist, studied song sparrows in her backyard. She has become a world authority on bird behavior and has outthought and outworked many a professional student of social organization in birds. Charles L. Broley, a banker, banded eagles for fun. He discovered a hitherto unknown fact that some eagles nest in the south in winter and then go vacationing to the north woods. Norman and Stuart Criddle, wheat ranchers on the Manitoba prairies, studied the fauna and flora of their farm and became recognized authorities on everything from local botany to wildlife cycles. Elliot S. Barker, cowman in the New Mexico mountains, has written one of the two best books on that elusive cat, the mountain lion. Do not let anyone tell you that these people made work out of play. They simply realized that the most fun lies in seeing and studying the unknown. Ornithology, mammalogy, and botany, as now known to most amateurs, are but kindergarten games compared with what is possible for and open to amateurs in these fields. One reason for this is that the whole structure of biological education, including education in wildlife, is aimed to perpetuate the professional monopoly on research. To the amateur are allotted only make-believe voyage of discovery to verify what professional authority already knows. What the youth needs to be told is that a ship is a building in its own mental dry dock, a ship with freedom of the seas. In my opinion, the promotion of wildlife research sports is the most important job confronting the profession of wildlife management. Wildlife has still another value, now visible only to a few ecologists, but of potential importance to the whole human enterprise. We now know that animal populations have behavior patterns of which the individual animal is unaware, but which he nevertheless helps to execute. Thus, the rabbit is unaware of cycles, but he is the vehicle for cycles. We cannot discern these behavior patterns in the individual or in short periods of time. The most intense scrutiny of an individual rabbit tells us nothing of cycles. The cycle concept springs from a scrutiny of the mass thought through decades. This raises the disquieting question: do human populations have behavior patterns of which we are unaware, but which we help to execute? Are mobs and wars, unrest and revolutions cut of such cloth? Many historians and philosophers persist in interpreting our mass behaviors as the collective result of individual acts of volition. The whole subject matter of diplomacy assumes that the political group has the properties of an honorable person. On the other hand, some economists see the whole of society as a plaything for processes, our knowledge of which is largely ex post facto. It is reasonable to suppose that our social processes have a higher volitional content than those of the rabbit, but it is also reasonable to suppose that we, as a species, contain population behavior patterns of which nothing is known because circumstance has never evoked them. We may have others, the meaning of which we have misread. This state of doubt about the fundamentals of human population behavior lends exceptional interest and exceptional value to the only available analog, the higher animals. Arrington, among others, has pointed out the cultural value of these animal analogs. For centuries, this rich library of knowledge has been inaccessible to us because we did not know where or how to look for it. Ecology is now teaching us to search in animal populations for analogies to our own problems. By learning how some small part of the biota ticks, we can guess how the whole mechanism ticks. The ability to perceive these deeper meanings and to appraise them critically is the woodcraft of the future. To sum up, wildlife once fed us and shaped our culture. It still yields us pleasure for leisure hours, but we try to reap that pleasure by modern machinery and thus destroy part of its value. Reaping it by modern mentality would yield not only pleasure, but wisdom as well.